What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode where we're covering some of the major headlines that have taken place in the news recently. Today's topic of discussion is redistricting, as well as the upcoming midterm elections. So let's get right into it. As it stands currently, there are 8 states that have passed new maps for the upcoming midterms. Notable of which California has added 5 new Democrat seats, bringing their state from a 43-9 Democrat to Republican to a 48-4 split between Democrats and Republicans. Utah has also added a seat for the Democrats, +1 for the Democrats, going from 4-0 for Republicans to now being 3-1. States that have added seats for the Republicans, starting with Texas, who have added 5 seats that are likely to go red, bringing their state from 26-12 to 31-7. Also, Florida has passed a new map, adding 4 seats for the GOP, bringing their state from 20-8 to 24-4. Ohio has also added 2 Republican seats, going from 10-5 to 12-3. Missouri has added a seat for the GOP, going from 6-2 to 7-1. North Carolina has added a seat for the Republicans, bringing the state from 10-4 to 11-3. And also, Tennessee has added a seat for the GOP, bringing them from 8-1 to 9-0. There are a handful of states that are in the middle of the redistricting process. The state of Alabama is proposing to add a seat for the GOP, which would bring the state from 5-2 to 6-1. Louisiana is in the process of redrawing their map. Of course, this is after the Calais decision, which made it unconstitutional to draw seats based on race. So Louisiana is now redrawing their map, which would likely add another seat for the GOP, bringing Louisiana from 4-2 to 5-1. Also, South Carolina is in this process as well, which would bring the state of South Carolina from 6-1 to 7-0. And also notable of which, the state of Virginia tried to pass a map that would have made the state go from 6-5 Democrat to 10-1, though Virginia's Supreme Court overruled this map, which brings them back to their original map of 6-5. So there was a potential for the addition of 4 more Democrat seats, which again was overruled in their state Supreme Court. Now, the current makeup of the 119th Congress is 218 seats held by the GOP, as opposed to 212 seats held by the Democrats. Now, in this upcoming midterm election, there are 19 likely seats that will be considered as toss-ups. And now let's head over to 270 to win, and we can kind of see where these seats are at. Now, again, let's operate under the assumption that Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina end up passing their new maps, which then brings um, these 3 districts into the hands of the GOP. Now, the state of Georgia is also potentially going to redraw their map. Georgia's holding a special session, as was called by their governor, which will take place on June 17th. So there is the possibility that Georgia could also pick up another seat for the GOP. However, the special session isn't until June 17th. And so let's further operate under the assumption that the seats that are considered toss-ups, let's say that those seats end up going back to the party that currently holds them to try and fill in this map a little bit. Um, so the 17th District of New York, the 8th District of Pennsylvania, the 7th District of Pennsylvania, the 7th District of New Jersey, 10th District of Pennsylvania, the 2nd District of Virginia. Let's see. Wasserman Schultz District down here in Florida, 9th District of Ohio, these two districts here in Michigan, the 3rd District of Wisconsin, the 1st District of Iowa, the 3rd District of Iowa, the 34th District of Texas, here in Arizona, the 6th District, as well as the 1st District, the 22nd District of California, the 8th District of Colorado, as well as the 3rd District of Washington. So again, operating under the assumption that Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina end up passing their maps, which looks like is going to be the case, as well as the assumption that toss-up states go back to the party that currently holds them. And as you can see, some of those districts end up going to Republicans, some of those districts end up going to Democrats. And as we fill in this map, we can see that the Republicans hold a 227 to 208 majority in the Congress, which ultimately yields the GOP 13 additional seats, as the GOP would go from a +6 majority to a +19 majority. And this is again with the possibility that the GOP could end up picking this seat up here in Georgia, which would then give them 228 to 207. Now, the way that it's currently flushing out on the prediction markets, you can see that here on Kalshi, they're only forecasting 206 to the GOP and almost 228 to the Democrats. On Polymarket, there is an 81% chance that the Democrats take the House, as well as a, again, 81 to 20% chance that the Democrats win the House in the midterms. Now, I think over time you'll see that these markets start to flatten out a little bit and will likely end up going to the GOP. However, for the time being, the way that the map is likely to end up is not what's being reflected on the prediction markets. So I definitely think that, again, those the prediction markets will start to flatten out the closer that we get to these midterm elections. Now, uh, and let's say, again, looking at these markets, let's say that you are very bullish on the Democrats, and let's say they end up flipping, 5 districts that are currently held by Republicans. Well, then you end up with 212 Democrat to 223 Republican. And even if this district here in Georgia doesn't pass, you're still at 222 Republican to 213 Democrat. So using pretty conservative metrics to try and measure out how the 120th Congress will end up turning out to look, it still looks as though the Republicans are going to pick up seats in the House. So I'm just not currently understanding the current state of these prediction markets, as it's not a perfect reflection of what's likely to happen in the midterms. again, just using some of the basic assumptions that, you know, the states that are currently redrawing their maps end up doing so, and the assumption that the seats that are currently held by a given party end up being held by that party again, would suggest that the GOP is actually going to pick up seats in the midterm as opposed to losing seats. Not well, and not only losing seats, but losing the majority in the House altogether. So I'm not in complete agreement with with the prediction markets. I don't think that's a perfect reflection of the future of the 120th Congress. And again, as we've um, laid out, even if you're bullish for the Democrats, if they flip again 5 of the 19 districts, they're still they have a long ways to go to get that majority. And a lot of these redistricting states that are picking up seats for the given party that controls them. The states, the 8 states that have already redistricted would add a +8 GOP um, swing, and the states that are undergoing redistricting would give 3 seats with the potential of 4. And for every seat that flips, it actually feels like a difference of 2, because adding 1 seat for one party takes that seat away from another party. So it's not only +1 to one side, it's -1 to the other. And so the +8 GOP that has already been locked in really feels like a +16 swing, because that +8 for the GOP might means that it's -8 for the Democrats. And again, with the potential of 3 or 4 more that are in the process of redrawing their map, could ultimately mean +11 to +12 for the GOP, which would result in a swing of 22 or 24 um, votes in Congress. So it's in terms of the battle of redistricting that's currently taking place for this upcoming midterm, the GOP have a serious advantage going into things. And as we've operated under this assumption that the GOP is going to win the seats that they currently hold, that the Democrats are going to win the seats that they currently hold. There's just not a clear path for the Democrats to win unless they win every single toss-up that's on the map. Now let's show the possibility of that happening, just for the sake of doing so. But let's say the Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina maps end up passing, and then the Democrats win in every single possible toss-up district that's on the map currently, which of course isn't a very likely scenario that one party is going to win every single toss-up. However, if we look back to the 2024 presidential election, actually the GOP won in every battleground state. So you can see that this is the only path that the Democrats have to taking control of the 120th Congress, is under the scenario that they win in every possible toss-up district, which of course isn't a very likely scenario. And this yields them an 11 seat majority. Again, this is not a likely scenario that one party wins every single toss-up. However, again, as I've stated, in the 2024 election, the GOP, they actually won every battleground state. So if there is a particular party that's more likely to win in those battleground districts, it would be the GOP, just based on their track record in the most recent election. However, with all that being said, we find ourselves at the end of another great episode. I'm glad that you were able to follow along here with me. I appreciate your time, and I do hope that you are following this midterm election. My name is Brett Cody Fornatoro. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I will see you in the next episode.